Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Startup Bright. I'm your host Nikolai Kolev. Our guest tonight is John from Atomic.
Yes.
Right? I can't remember how we met. I think it was through Donovan and his Kodu Startups event.
Yes, it was that
Right.
pitch event.
Yeah, pitch event. So John has a really interesting startup, and I myself as a techie really like the idea of building zero code platforms. So why don't you go ahead and give us your official pitch?
Okay, great. My name is John Hall. I'm the founder and CEO of a new company called Atomic. I've worked in various Los Angeles-based startups for the past 22 years. In 2012, I was co-founder and CTO of a startup called TradeZ, and before that, I was a director of technology for Cars.com. But the reason I created Atomic is because, well, software is difficult and expensive to create, and unfortunately, we all just take that for granted. Programming languages and frameworks have evolved over the last 60 years, but they've really only simplified programming a little bit. So my new company, Atomic, is a web-based SaaS platform that lets developers create software an order of magnitude faster than they can now. So UI-wise, it's very similar to something like Squarespace or Wix, but it's aimed at letting software developers create any kind of site, app, or even desktop app or back-end system, not just simple product sites. And I estimate that Atomic will cut software development costs by over 90%, and it will allow companies to cut months off of their development timelines. So using Atomic, developers can create sites, phone apps, desktop apps, and back-end Unix systems for anything from enterprise business software, small business software, scientific, and really anything else they need. Atomic redefines the coding framework, and it forces radical simplicity, hence the name Atomic, allowing developers to automatically generate most of the code they need. Initially, we're going to be going after software development shops because that's the most obvious use case. But then from there, we're going to definitely expand into the enterprise market. But really, the long-term goal of Atomic is to change how software is created worldwide. Once we have enough features and functionality built in, it will allow non-developers to create almost any site or app that they need. And of course, non-developers will still need the help of designers, but they won't need the help of programmers. So in a nutshell, that's Atomic.
Okay. Are there any other platforms that are similar to your platform, and how is your platform different than existing platforms?
Well, this is proprietary, but it has to do with how different types of information in software development are currently being treated as the same type of information, but they're not the same type of information. So on the front end, you have the overall page frame, then you have UI kit components, which are really just containers that sit on the page frame. Then you have a color palette, then you have a font palette, then you have information display patterns that get applied to individual UI kit components. And then on the back end, you have your data source connection information, you have your data retrieval patterns, and then of course you have the data or information itself. Right now, the only two options out there for coding are writing everything by hand. And when you write everything by hand, unfortunately, all of the frameworks we're using mix these different types of information that are essentially incompatible. All of the low-code and no-code tools out there, all of them mix these types of information that are essentially incompatible. So when you keep these layers of information separate during the code creation process, which is really the creative process of building something, it allows you to automatically generate code based on only a handful of patterns for each individual layer. But when layers of information are combined, the patterns really become infinite. Does that make sense? When you separate the layers of information, each layer only has a few patterns, and that's what Atomic does. It properly separates layers of information.
Okay. So when you say patterns, can you go a little bit deeper in that?
Yeah, so the most obvious patterns are information retrieval patterns. The vast majority of information retrieval patterns only fall into really two cases. One, pulling one record from a database, or two, of course, pulling multiple records from a database. If you look at any app or web page, all of the components on that page, or the vast majority of them, fall into one of those two patterns. And when you properly separate the layers of information, it allows you to efficiently make use of those two patterns. And I realize it sounds simple, but it's not obvious. And for some reason, no one else is taking this approach.
So this is one of the major differentiations between Atomic and existing systems.
Yes.
That's my understanding.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, and when you say you break down into multiple pieces or layers, how did you come up with the layers, specific layers that you break down a potential application or building a potential application?
Just by analyzing hundreds of different applications and web pages and looking to see where information was incompatible with creating a simple pattern, basically. It's something that is difficult to explain, but once you see it in action, it's kind of an aha moment.
Okay. And how do you then utilize each of these components, or how are they independently deployed? Are they independently generated? How do you work with these components?
They're independently generated, but all within one workspace, and then you just say how to fit them together.
I see.
It's a very simple process that requires zero coding.
How did you come up with this idea?
During my time as a developer and CTO of various companies, I always had one thought stuck in the back of my mind, is that software should be a lot simpler to create than it is. The sad truth is that most of the time, writing code feels like drudgery. It can be exciting at first when you're first starting a project, and then the further you get in, the days go by, the weeks go by, it becomes drudgery. And I realized how many patterns myself and my team, how many things we were having to do over and over and over and over again. So really, it's a long and often boring process. And over the past 22 years, I've literally gone through periods of hating writing code and have seen my employees go through that as well. So about 10 years ago, I started challenging the assumptions about software that we all take for granted. One, that software is difficult to create. Two, that software is expensive to create. Three, that it takes a long time to create software. And four, that to create enterprise quality software, it requires a large team of developers. We all just take these for granted. So about 10 years ago, I started thinking about how software is constructed from many different angles and points of view. And over time, I came to realize that the main conflating factor in software development is that we combine and mix incompatible types of information. So I started developing ways of breaking down information to its core components. Once again, that's how I came up with the name Atomic. It's based on core patterns. Then about 18 months ago, I started creating the proof of concept for the platform that is now the alpha version that I have today.
I see. John, are you developing this yourself only? Are you one-man team, or you have co-founders and people that are helping you? Because when I look at this, it's a very serious task, and it's very hard thing to accomplish. I don't believe that it is possible for truly for a single person to achieve what you're trying to do.
Well, that's a fair question for sure. I've been working with 3 part-time developers, and 2 of them will be joining me full-time when I have funding, so it's been somewhat of a group effort. I've done a huge amount of the back-end work, but a developer I've been working with for years named Matt Grubb, and another developer, a phenomenal front-end developer named Brett Hayes. Matt is a brilliant software architect and developer, and he's by far the best developer I've ever worked with. He's a real machine when it comes to coding. And Brett is an incredibly good front-end developer that Matt knows and trusts and has worked with in the past. And so the 3 of us, plus one other person that dropped out of development, she burned out on it completely. My friend Rebecca burned out on coding, and she's just happy for me to give her a bonus check at some point.
It's very hard. I mean, what you described is a platform. Sounds to me like a huge effort to be able to abstract so many cases and way of developing and connecting to different sources and presenting data in different ways. It's a tremendous work.
And that's the thing, though, that I mentioned earlier, is when you combine layers of information, what you have to create for a platform like this is nearly infinite. And that's why all of the low-code and no-code tools out there each only cover very specific use cases, and none of them cover anything very broad. But when you separate layers of information, like we're doing with Atomic, it does simplify it a lot. So it's not as big of a project as you would think because of that fact. Because each individual layer only has a handful of patterns.
I see. Yeah, I mean, this is a very interesting idea, something that I would definitely enjoy working with. But apparently you put the time to think about this, looking for solutions, so you are definitely more in depth of the problem. You mentioned that your platform will allow for development for mobile, web, and phone applications.
Yes.
How do you achieve that? Do you have like a library that is specific for say mobile platform or phones or desktop platform?
In essence, yes. It's really what we have now is a meta platform, and it's focused on React Native. But because the pattern, there's only a handful of patterns on each layer that we have to code for React Native, translating those into the top 7 programming languages will really truly not be that big of a task. Okay. I realize it sounds monumental, but it's not.
Okay. When you say top 7 languages, can you mention a few?
Yeah, Java, Node, C#, Swift, Python, and PHP.
Okay. Well, you cover pretty much all.
Yeah, Java and JavaScript alone cover a lot.
Yeah. And this will allow to build a full stack application, like from front end and back end.
Soup to nuts. Yeah, everything.
And is it going to be kind of, if I have to connect to the database, is it going to be code first or data first? How do you approach that? Do you code the relationships and objects and then you get...
It's data first. It's a data first architecture. I mean, you can create the front end. You can actually have your designer go in and work on the frames, the UI kit, the font palette and the color palette on their own, while an engineer goes in and works on creating the data structure from the ground up and then applying the back-end retrieval patterns to those data structures.
Okay, so your platform allows still for developers to be dedicated in different pieces of the whole application.
If they want to be, absolutely.
Yeah, so the development can be done in parallel.
Yeah,
it
especially
doesn't.
because developers are not designers usually. And so, there's always going to be the need for a designer working on the UI kit end of things. Okay. Absolutely.
And how does your platform fit within the new microservices paradigm? Is it going to be easy to scale it? To scale an application that is built with your platform?
Because it's a meta platform, it can use microservices if that's what you want to build or not. It's really up to your use case.
All right. Who is your customer? You mentioned that you will be initially looking into offering this to software development shops, but that may be step one. What is your vision? How you're going to be building your actually market share?
Yeah, we're going to start with direct sales to software development shops, and then we're going to be test marketing online on the Stack Overflow sites. They have several different sites, and of course other online channels. But slowly but surely we're going to be building out our sales approach. So starting with dev shops and then expanding to startups and then eventually enterprise once we have nailed the sales process.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure startups are going to be very good client, because, or any rapid development shops, because this will allow for even building quick prototypes and proof of concept kind of applications. Because right now, if you ask me, when somebody comes to me and says, "Hey, I want to build this app," or "I want to build this website," and it's very simple.
Right.
Right away I'm like, okay.
Of course.
Even only thinking about security is not a simple thing.
Right. That always should raise red flags.
Absolutely. And then many people, they start from very beginning thinking about scalability and having hundreds and thousands of users. The premature optimization kind of thing happens, and it's not really easy to get something out quickly, to test it on the market, and then invest if you have to further, and I don't know if needs to have some specific builds or enhancements.
So many companies try to do that with WordPress or Wix or Squarespace, and then they never end up with really what they need, even for their prototype. They end up with something close, but not what they need. But with Atomic, our goal really is to let you quickly create exactly what you need.
So when is this platform going to be available? I'm kind of looking really forward to see what you guys have to offer, because again, there's so many people that are out there and looking for rapid development. The rapid development has been a term for I don't know how many years, and hasn't been achieved yet.
It's not really rapid yet.
Yeah, you can. I have to agree that languages, software development languages, became more abstract and allow for applying design patterns in higher and easier way, but you still have to dig into the details to the point where, as you said, it becomes boring and tedious, and that's how people make mistakes. That's how they start cutting corners.
Right.
And that is the real problem with security
Right.
and all that.
Or you get 99% done with a project, and then whoever wants it built changes the specs on you.
Well, that's given.
That happens all the time.
Because business changed, market changed. It's normal. Like
Yeah.
I myself have accepted that requirements are never finished.
Yeah.
And once you kind of accept that for yourself, it's very easy when the business comes in and says, hey, we don't want this anymore. I know you spent 6 months building that,
Right.
but we cannot use it. And with a rapid development tool like Atomic, this kind of stuff will eventually be minimized, because business will have a quick way of testing, running, building, and putting in front of customers, right?
So the alpha version is far enough along to, I would love to show you a demo at some point, or anyone else who's watching this video. But the beta, we plan to go into beta test 5 months after funding this round, and then to release the version, the React Native version, the React Native JavaScript version of this product 7 months after funding.
Okay.
And then from there, really nail down the product market fit.
I see. And your team is going to be eventually your first employees, your current team going to become
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, and then after we reach that initial product launch, I'm going to be hiring on, of course, more engineers, but sales and marketing as well.
Well, since we started that path, maybe it's good to talk about what are you looking for in an investor, or how much you're looking to be invested in your idea. Can you?
Yeah, I mean, ideally, I want to find an investor that can be as passionate about changing the software space as I am. And of course, somebody who can help me attract world-class talent. Of course, that would be a nice to have. But also somebody who's willing to be straightforward and honest with me. I've been CTO before, but I've never been CEO. Somebody who can, call me on my own mistakes, and who's willing to, argue with me and get in the weeds a little bit. Ideally, that's somebody who can help me mature as a leader.
Yeah. And do you have a number in your head how much you're looking for?
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking for 500,000 for a pre-seed round at this point.
And that's going to give you how much of a runway?
12 months.
12 months.
Yeah.
And after 12 months, the timeline is to release the beta version, or?
The beta version will be released. We plan on beta testing 5 months after funding, and then releasing version 1 7 to 7.5 months after funding.
I see.
And then from there, really nail down our first set of customers.
Right. You said this is a software as a service.
Yes.
Right. Can you give us a little bit more details about the SaaS approach? Like, how are you going to be, if I am a user that wants to use Atomic, how much do I pay? Is it monthly? Is it per user? How do you license Atomic?
It's per user for one programming language. On the back end, it's all based on the back end programming language that's chosen. It's $400 a month per user, per seat, for one language, or $1,000 a month for all of the languages we have built into the platform. Obviously, we won't be able to charge that much out of the gate, but the initial pricing will be $400 a month per seat, and then eventually we plan on basically a la carte pricing for additional features as things get built out. For example, if a dev shop creates a fantastic HR system or financing system on Atomic and wants to license it for royalties, then it can be an add-on plug and play product.
I see. So if I'm paying you, say, $1,000 a month for any language that I want to be generated, then once I finish the application and release it to the public, do I still pay you royalties for that, or
No, only
no?
to use. We only want to be in the business of providing the platform.
I see.
And the software.
So you're providing development tools.
Exactly.
You're not going to be in my pocket when I...
Not at all. And it's like once you're done with Atomic, you don't have to keep paying for it once you're done developing. But to be fair, to edit it, you most likely will want to use Atomic because of how the code will be structured.
No, I understand that. Is a like you are offering a development tool,
Yeah.
and if I use it, I have to have my license updated and be current, right?
Right.
That I understand. I was more of a kind of wanted to understand if you will be receiving royalties once I deploy my application. So the next question would be, let's say I build an application in Java or C#. If I build it in C#, I assume you're generating code, source code. Then can I take that code and continue building, or enhance using different tools? And because C# is Microsoft-based language, can I eventually import that in Visual Studio and continue from there developing? Okay, or in Java, can I import that in?
I don't think anybody will want to do that.
Just a theoretical question.
But absolutely, yeah. That's a good question.
That's an interesting not alternative, but ability, because I'm pretty sure that will open a lot of possibilities for and opportunities for developers.
And the cool thing about Atomic, one of the things I'm most excited about is, let's say you create it in React Native JavaScript. If you don't go in and edit any of the back-end code, once the other languages are built into Atomic, you can then translate it to the other languages because they use the same core components. They use the same patterns.
I see. Okay, so I have a question about if you have encountered any roadblocks or real issues while building your platform, because any startup that I talk about, they either have problem with co-founders or with software developers. I know a few startups that they actually had to start again and again because the software development team or developers got bored, and it is very hard to get to find money to get funded. And when people have, I would say, unrealistic expectations of when this is going to happen, then startups experience all these hiccups and problems.
Yeah. Well, over the past several years, I've hit several technical roadblocks. I would get part way into building the platform and realized that I was at a complete impasse and would literally have to put it away for a few months. And then I would start again and get to the same point with another technical challenge. But finally, 18 months ago, I got past all of the roadblocks, and it was when I really realized that how to properly separate the layers of information, and that made all of the difference. But I've definitely had other roadblocks in. I'd say my biggest roadblock now is in explaining Atomic to people, because it's a new category of platform. Really, it's the first multi-language, multi-platform, open use case, low code or no code tool. And so nobody really has a good reference point for what it is. And so it's hard to understand that it's for creating any kind of software. So I get asked things like, isn't this just like Bubble? Or isn't this just like WordPress? But those tools are extremely limited to what they can do. They're limited to websites, and like Bubble is limited to JavaScript only, and you have to use their cloud platform. Everything's hosted on their cloud platform. But with Atomic, we don't host anything. We don't want to be in the hosting business. You don't have to call our API. All of the code that is generated is 100% editable if you need to edit it, and then you can deploy it wherever you want to deploy it.
Okay.
And so that's kind of been a continual frustration, is differentiating Atomic versus all of the other tools that people have heard of and used. And then I get asked a lot, why hasn't this been done before? That's a big question that I'm sure everybody that's watching this video is thinking right now. Why hasn't a wealthy, smart company like Google or Microsoft created a system like this? And I mean, to be blunt, it's a hard problem. And to be clear, I don't think I'm smarter than other engineers or architects out there. I just ask my wife. I've been obsessed with this one problem literally for the past decade, and I think that not settling for the status quo and not falling into thinking this is too hard or this is impossible has over time led me to this place.
Yeah, this is, I would say, a perfect definition of entrepreneur, and somebody that would skip everybody else's advice.
Well, and to be fair, I have given up several times, but literally within a few weeks, my brain starts working on it again.
Yeah, so you're dedicated, and you have been dedicated on this idea for long enough to eventually find a breakthrough. And I really hope that you found the proper way and a good way to implement this platform. In terms of expandability of your platform, are you guys thinking about allowing other developers to contribute to your tools?
Yes, absolutely. I think that's going to be an important part of it. Either for royalties, like I said, for add-on products, or if they truly have an open source mindset, these could be add-ons that are free for people to use.
Are you thinking about offering open source version of your product as well?
I don't know yet. I don't know. Yeah, I've definitely thought about it because I've been part of the open source community, and I want this platform to give back to that community, but I don't know in what aspect it will be contributing to that community.
Yeah, you mentioned that you don't want to be in the hosting business, but I can easily see a marketplace that you can offer for third-party tools that can go with your platform.
Yeah, that's definitely something that to me is inevitable with this type of platform.
Yeah. So you mentioned we talk about investors and how much money you're looking for. You've been doing this for quite a few years. Do you have an exit strategy in mind when you building this, or you're still too early to talk about that?
It's pretty early. I mean, obviously, it'd be fantastic if Google came knocking on my door, or I could see a company like this going public.
Yeah.
But it feels a little silly talking about it at this phase.
Yeah.
But it's nice to dream about.
So eventually, your ideal exit strategy would be having some of the big companies acquiring your product and going further with that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And this is definitely something that I want to be involved in long term, because I really want to see it through to its full potential.
Yeah, that would be ideal situation, right? Because that way you're gonna be developing further your idea with resources that you probably can't afford at the moment. Even if you get funded by a VC at some point, you still have to, you cannot go after the market share or markets that are going to be available for any of these big, big companies. Yeah. I honestly am very interested in your platform. I checked your website. It's not public yet, right? You can only subscribe to get notified.
Right now it's just a subscription page with our logo on it.
Right. Are you guys planning to make this a little bit more visible to the rest of the world so people know and kind of build their appetite of what is coming up?
Yeah, it's going to be that's going to be something we work on once we have initial funding. But I'm personally terrible at anything front-end related, but that's something that I would want a good designer and copywriter to work on with us.
Yeah, some of the startups, in kind of following the advice of one of my friends who is also early stage investor, Alex Beduret, why don't you look for clients that can benefit from using your platform, and they can eventually become your investors? I'm pretty sure if you talk to Alex, he would say find a use case for one of these big companies, present it to them, build something for them using the platform, and in many cases they become investor in your company.
Yeah, and I definitely see that as a possibility once we get to the beta stage. But unfortunately, right now with the alpha version, it's too early. It's too early, to go for that approach.
All right. Thank you very much for being
Thank you so much.
here, and it was a real pleasure for me to talk to you, and I hope we can meet again and kind of have an update where Atomic is, where you are in the near future. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you.